I got to ask, like, you must get a lot of different topics. The obvious one is probably talking about the whole super yachts thing and discovering, the dirt and all that sort of stuff. But what's the topic that you wish people asked you about? What do you wish you could talk about more in these interviews?
Well, one that I feel would be important to share for people that are starting their own businesses. I mean, one of the reasons we succeeded is our product and our purpose and the way we've delivered it. Timing was a huge part of it, and we had a network of people that wanted to see us succeed. And often I have people that come to me that want business advice. They've got this capital, they've got this idea, and they're going to throw it all together and they're going to launch a business onto the internet, and it's going to be a huge success. And it very well might be, but what was amazing for us without the money is we could feel our way to what the customers wanted, and we could feel our way to success. And I wouldn't change that part of the experience for anything. And I know I wouldn't have got that part of the experience if I had sat down at the beginning and done a calculation on specifically how much I needed to be a successful company. So I guess that would be the only message that I feel like is often overlooked in these conversations or in just podcasts in general is don't underestimate how when you get traction, you know you're getting traction. And when you have an idea that's good, you know that it's good because people will take it even if it looks like 70% of what you intended it to look like, or even if you forgot a box, or even if you forgot this, that and the other, because the idea is good, the timing's right. So it's that whole Silicon Valley mantra, like if you were proud of your first product, you waited too long to launch it. It's that whole thing. The only thing that I would say is the idea is important, the timing is important. The actual execution of that and getting that 100%, for us it wasn't as important because there's certainly parts of what we did that I am embarrassed about these days. And making sure that you have a strong network around you is really important because it was hard. It was really hard. And there was times where I just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. It's too hard. I worked for 1.5 years without any wage. And, by the end of it, my undie drawer needed just a complete wipe out because, you shouldn't have the same undies for 5 years in a row. Yeah. But I couldn't afford anymore.
You can't afford new clothes.
You can't afford new clothes. You can't afford new anything. And so...
Yeah, that's the life.
That was the life, right? Even, we should meet up and talk about business at this cafe. And I'd think...
No.
What about if we just sat on a park bench and had a coffee instead? So, I mean, that side was tough. Like, obviously, the having no money is tough as well, but it was nice that there weren't kind of investors as well. But, yeah, I would just say just be really careful when you're launching an idea to make sure you have enough room to feel your way through what the successful parts of it are going to be. Because if we had just put everything we had into the very first thing of what we launched, we would have missed so much that makes us kind of who we are these days.
Well, it sounds like, so timing you can't really impact.
Yeah.
Like you can, maybe you can convince yourself that I should do this right now versus wait. But at the end of the day, a lot of times you can't. But the network thing, I'm curious what you think there that people can do. And to me, it sounds like generally you're talking about, because you read 30 minutes a night, right? I do a similar thing. I think the only way I've been able to explain it to other entrepreneurs is you just have to be an open and creative person and you have to always be reading, always coming up with things, giving your brain space to do that and be creative, whether that's through a network or books or whatever.
Yeah.
And that awareness over time will just give you space to work it out.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, definitely the point of the network for me was about taking nuggets of experience from everybody else and chewing them for a little bit and seeing what I could take out of them. And so I did not walk into business with a network of entrepreneurs. No way. I worked my ass off to create that network that I've got now. I used to pick one person that I wanted to speak to every month, and I had to have one important conversation with somebody I didn't know. And so I would send them laundry detergent, and then I would follow up with their assistant. And in the end, you only have to do that a few times before one person can introduce you to another person who knows another person who might be able to help you. And I remember having conversations where people say, "And how'd you get my contact number?" And I'd be like, "Oh, well, that's a long story." But I really worked the chain on that one.
Do you know what? When you say that, now I realise how lucky I am having this podcast, because there's so many people that we've become friends with, or you have relationships that you're just on good terms with that just would not exist if you just said, "Hey, can I grab a coffee," or whatever. And sometimes you as well on the network thing, you often, I don't know if you had this, but I overlooked certain people that you had in front of you that you should have been tapping into because they're willing to do it, or they have a perspective that you just, I think in particular, Dan Monheit, who runs Hard Hat Agency, has been immeasurably helpful for me. And when I was starting out in this space, I just didn't even think, ask him this or that. He's open to the discussions. I don't know why I thought that. Maybe I thought he was busy. Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe you thought you were competing, which often turns out you're not.
Maybe, maybe I naively thought that.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure I may have thought that initially, which is just ridiculous to think, because he's in a totally another level. But he was me 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And so to have that is... sometimes you just don't realise, and sometimes you just need to sit and think about who those people may be.
I think that's so important, and I think there's a lot of great incubators like StartMate and all the rest that will give you that. But there's a lot of people that have great ideas as well that maybe don't have their presentation polished enough to get into those incubators, or maybe not ready to throw that much commitment into the business at the same time. That doesn't preclude you from accessing those networks. And I think, for me, I would just say if I hadn't had done that conversation thing, and I really put myself out there and walked into these places and found these people sometimes, and even the first desk that I had, it was because I struck up a relationship with a co-working space across the road because I was a neighbour, and then they gave me a space for free. Just all that stuff. And then it turned out there was 8 other businesses that were at very similar stages to me in that same thing. And we've all grown together through the information that everybody else is.
Chat together,
and so things like Facebook advertising, which I mentioned we didn't know about. It wasn't a coincidence that I got that desk at the same time that I learnt about all those things. So, I would say yes, your money is important, and yes, your idea is important, and yes, your execution is important. And those things are well and truly discussed in business kind of podcasts. But I would also say don't underestimate the support network you're going to need when the times get tough. The people who are going to have the advice that might just crack open the next door for you and say something so interesting that you're like, oh, that just pacifies that whole chain of fear.
Why didn't I think about
Why didn't I think of that first?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is timing. You'll know if you don't have traction. If you've burnt $500,000 and you're not making that in sales, and you can't see where you're going to make it from in sales, then probably I'd say quit early, because traction feels like traction when you've got it and you know about it. So, or just make sure that you have that money behind you to pivot a little bit.
Yeah.
Because people can just stubbornly get caught up on this is what the idea was going to be, and people don't know about it. For us, that pivot was when a customer suggested to us nearly 3 years ago, can I refill these packs?
Yeah, I remember reading that,
And we were like, oh,
yes,
actually that could be our whole company.
Yeah.
And that was awesome, right? And that was our kind of pivot that thankfully we had enough in our tank to kind of explore that avenue and evolve the next products and everything. So that'd probably be my 2 things that I'm like, why does no one ever talk about that?
And that's the snippet. Jacob will probably snippet that for the clip channel.